organize myself again. The next speaker is Sergio Andres Coronado Delgado, I'm hoping I'm pronouncing this understandably, who is a lawyer and specialist in constitutional law. He has also a master in rural development. He currently serves as a team coordinator and land and territory rights at CINEP, a research center appointed to the Colombian Platform for Human Rights, Democracy and Development Research. Sergio has published articles and papers on issues such as human rights of indigenous and black communities, consultations, land conflicts and territorial human rights policies. And he will speak about social and environmental impacts of mining and oil extraction in Latin America. And I have to tell the audience that you noticed there was no translation from English to another language in the first speech. That is due to the distance and the difficulty in the bad sound, but all the other speeches will have proper translations. I'll give you the floor, Sergio, for 10 minutes, in whatever language that you please. Fine, if you put on your mic. Yes.
Okay. Muchas gracias por la.
Thank you very much for inviting me to speak to you today. I'd like to thank the Committee for Development for organising a hearing on this vital subject. The ideas we're putting forward are a reflection of the work of the Colombian Platform for Human Rights, Democracy and Development, a network bringing together more than 100 organizations working for human rights in Colombia. Over the last few years, Colombia has seen a lively debate on the role of mining in the process of national development. The colonial history of Latin America exposed the great difficulties that mining has, because it could be a process which could encourage economic growth, but we need to factor in human rights into all of this. And in Colombia, all of this history plays into the current social resistance to mining activities. The country has gone through a period of great increase in mining. In 1 decade, the amount of carbon mined, of coal mined, went from 38,242 million of tons in the year 2000 to 74,250 million tons in 2010. Also, the amount of land given over to mining over the last few years has been increasing dramatically. Mining rights currently cover used to cover 1.1 million hectares in 2002 and now has reached 8.4 million hectares in 2009. This has led to the emergence and deepening of social conflict connected to the presence of mining industries. Between 2001 and 2011, there were around 274 social conflicts linked to mining of coal and gold, and also of oil drilling. We've also seen repression of protests and criminalization of process. And what we've also seen is a flouting of the human rights of parts of the Colombian population. Mining on a large scale has not tackled conditions of poverty in those areas where mining activities have been increasing. In the commune of Cesar, in the middle of the country, in the number of people who were living without their basic needs met was over 50%, and the average for that part of the country is around 30%. This situation is linked to the tax policy connected to mining income. Current policy seems to favor foreign investment by loosening regulations and setting up exemptions and advantages for foreign countries, instead of setting up real tax rates which would allow a fair participation of all of society in the natural resources of the country. For many rural communities, the open cast mining has really transformed their country and how they live. Lots of land which used to be used for farming has now been turned into mines. This has limited access to water and has led to a deterioration in water quality. These people affected by this are calling for their human rights to be respected. And in a recent case, the Constitutional Court ordered that these people's rights should be protected. Also, 3,500 indigenous families started legal action against the local authorities for, again, in an area where there is an iron nickel mine run by BHP Billiton, a British company. They accused the company of damaging local resources, of pollution, and of personal injury. There's also a connection between mining and forced displacement of the population. Over the last 50 years, Colombia has been going through armed conflict. And there seems to be continuing conflict in those areas where mining is based. So all these things these forces have to live together. But it does seem that the mining industry has not put an end to the existence of armed groups in the country. So what we need to do is underline the coincidence, the fact that these serious infringements of human rights are occurring mainly in the areas where mining activities are going on. 80% of forced displacements come from those areas where there is mining activities. 78% of crime against trade unions take place in those areas, 89% of crimes against indigenous peoples, and 90% of crimes against Afro-Colombians. All of these things happen in those places where mining activities take place. It's also important to underline that in the growth of mining activity, many rural communities have had to be replaced, relocated, and others find themselves dealing with problems of resettlement caused by pollution. And the companies who've caused this damage do not always have to pay compensation for the damage. There's also a connection between mining and the violation of rights of ethnic groups. According to the Controller General of Colombia, the total amount of collective land owned by black communities, well, 6% of it has licensed for mining rights, and 16.5% of it is under consideration for mining activities. And similar things are happening in the areas safeguarded for indigenous populations. Mining activities often ignore the procedure for prior informed consent that should be given to those indigenous and Afro-Colombian communities. And the United Nations High Commission for Human Rights, in its last report on Colombia, also thought that there should be a broad participative process, but that in Colombia there was no one single example of good practice in this area. As regards the relation between mining and violation of environmental rights, the current legal framework really needs to be strengthened to enforce the public interest. This means that conflict between mining activities and other activities such as farming or environmental conservation, at the moment these things often go in favor of mining. In early May, the government passed a law which denied local authorities the right to ban mining from their areas. In the same way, the government was ignoring a local vote taking in Piedras, Tolima, where citizens voted against transforming agricultural land into mining land and voted against giving gold mining rights to a mining company. And the Controller General's office warned against the serious shortcomings displayed by the Colombian state when it comes to environmental studies and proper monitoring of mining activities. The report said that there was a serious impact of mining on water, on the soil, on the air, on biodiversity, on the countryside. There also seems to be a lack of data about the impact of mining on environmental health. We've seen pollution of the air, which has led to more acute respiratory infections. And there's been a study in the area of La Guajira, where there is plenty of mining activity, that acute respiratory infections are the second highest cause of death in those areas around the mine. Now, given that the European Union is passing measures regarding corporations and regarding human rights, we would like to present the following recommendations. Initiatives such as EITI or initiatives from the United Nations are a step in the right direction but are not sufficient. What we need to do is to come up with binding instruments and mechanisms which allow people who have suffered victimization, collective mine activities, to get access to justice. This access to justice should not just be to national courts, but should also facilitate access to the legal systems in those countries where the mining countries have their headquarters. Furthermore, the European Union needs to ensure that mining companies publish full impact assessments, these so-called non-financial reports. These should be accompanied by social audits where those communities affected can participate directly alongside the civil society organizations that accompany them. Given that Colombia is coming out of a long period of armed conflict, it has to be understood that these minerals are being extracted from conflict zones, high-risk conflict zones. So we call on the European Union to apply the rules of transparency and due diligence in the supply chain to all extractive industries. This obligation should be implemented for all natural resources in Colombia which are used in Europe. This committee for development in the European Parliament could play a leading role in these initiatives. We have to understand the long-term ecological and social consequences of mining and calculate this into the price that we pay for all of these minerals and metals. Large-scale mining, accelerated mining, cannot go hand in hand with social projects for sustainability. This is the lesson we've learned from the history of Latin America. Thank you very much.